to the AM Sisters podcast. You're here today with your host, Anna and Maria Setting, bringing you your favorite twin talk of the week. And because it's the month of March, we're going to talk about, guess what? Women's History Month. So Women's History Month is celebrated in the United States, Australia, Canada, and UK. But like in Canada, I think it's in the month of October. And it's not an international holiday, but I think it makes us question a lot of things about gender, about women's rights, equality, and all those things. And we just had the 8th of March, that is Women's International Women's Day. And this is commemorated, celebrated internationally. So, but it's interesting to me, the word Women's History Month, because if you think about it, it implies a lot of things in itself. First, why women's history needed to have this month designated for it, and it was in the late 70s, so pretty recently. And where were women throughout all this time? We're half of the world population. Where is our history?
I truly believe our history of us as women, not only cis, but everyone who identifies as women,
Yes.
We were silenced, right? That's why we didn't have a history. That's why we've been hearing only masculine history, only the worldview of men, right? Because all history, all kinds of histories, they are interpretation of facts. And this interpretation is showing a point of view of who is in power. And until pretty recently, only men could have this power of perpetuating a narrative and this history that we know. But it doesn't mean that this is what truly happened, because women, they have always been so important. I mean, we are here as human beings because somebody was our moms, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't even have been born. So our history is truly, truly important. But we didn't have the social power, to be heard. That's the fact, yeah.
That's right. And I think it's important to say, like you were saying, history is like an exercise of power. Who writes history? And it's important to say that until nowadays has been pretty much cisgender men, white cisgender men specifically. So it's a very small part of the world population that has been telling stories about everyone else or excluding them, because narrative is not only about what is included, but what is excluded purposefully. And women's history is also something that is being shared mainly throughout oral history. So it's not exactly in textbooks. It's not exactly the thing you're going to find in encyclopedias and the academic knowledge, because university itself is a very male-dominated institution from the beginning. They didn't accept women to go within, resulting in the history we know that doesn't include women's perspectives. And only recently, I would say, with all academic researchers and all those things. But women's oral history is so important because it tells us so much about who we are and the mother line, and telling our roles in society. And the role of women has been also represented as medicine women and the ones who deal with rites of passage in the community, the birth, the death, and all the things in between. They are the caregivers, they are the supporters, and women have historically they've been working in society in various different ways, but sometimes it's a work that is made invisible, I would say.
This work's made invisible only because of our society and the structure of, capitalism, giving value only for those who are productive by the means of capital, right? And I think it's really important to talk about storytelling, because It gives us a perspective of the other side, of the underdogs, of the people who have not been heard or who have not been given the chance to express themselves in a way that is considered legitimized or official. So those unofficial narratives are really, really important to put some light into histories of people who have not had the chance to be shown, or represented. And one aspect of culture that is really important is that culture is not static. It's always evolving and changing. So I think storytelling is a way that really permits and allows this transformation and this interpretation of things in a way that suits the person who is living the culture in that moment. And also to those who have been, the history that have been passed down, the way that people receive that history. It's also being shaped because no person will tell the history the same way when it's spoken, right? And adding little facts and taking some others is what makes this culture and this story be shaped in a way that is truly meaningful and true to the moment and to the people who are telling the stories. And this shows a lot about the history of women, and we see many people, sharing songs that their grandmas used to sing to them, or tales, or histories that are almost like fairy tales, but they always have something that is really deep and transformational and something that aggregates value and will show a kind of lesson to the person who is receiving that knowledge.
Yes. And like you were saying, I think it's important to say that every time that there is power, there is also counterpower.
Resistance.
And I think, yes, this kind of, so I think the role of women in telling those stories is also a submersive role in like changing power dynamics. And because they were expected to be the ones raising children and telling the stories, teaching them how to act in community, how to be part of that society, and giving like the morals and all those things, they play a very, very big role, foundational role in societies and communities in general. And even like there are some theories that talk about the role of grandmothers in the development of societies, how they're important for like the structuring of communities, because they were the ones who had to stay with the kids. So they were the ones who had to teach them how to behave and how to, interact among themselves. And I think it's fascinating what you're saying about storytelling and like tales, because everyone is familiar with fairy tales, I think. It can be from the very spooky ones, like the Grinch brothers. And Green Brothers was their name.
Yeah, I think so.
And like the original fairy tales, but like the original fairy tales, they were spooky and they were scary and they had a lesson, because usually they were told to young girls to warn them about the dangers of the world, and not just saying like a prince in a shining armor will come and save you, but more like be aware, you have your power, you have your strength, but the world is not always this nice place. You learn to defend yourself, you learn to. And we were discussing earlier, me and my sister, about Disney fairy tales and how like women as being portrayed in those fairy tales, like the princesses.
I mean, the old ones, okay.
The old ones, yes. I cannot save most of them. Yes, because they're so problematic.
I think the first one we can talk a little bit about is the Beauty and the Beast. I really don't like that one. I mean, the Beauty is such a...
Go ahead.
The Beauty is such a smart girl, and she has all the potential, and she's such a lovely person with her dad, who's also a nice guy, and she's powerful and strong. As you were saying, like keeping her boundaries with the Gaston, I think was his name, right?
Yeah, Belle knows how to put her boundaries in place. She doesn't allow Gaston to mess around with her. And she's very smart. She knows her place in the village and she questions everything. But then, she gets napped by the beast. And she decides to stay in the castle. I mean,
first of all, it's a kidnap. And
yes.
she's being held hostage, by a person who is not even a person, is like a monster or a beast. It's not pretty at all. Imagine this in real life, a guy who looks like a beast imprisoning you in a castle far away from everyone. That's not pretty. And it's kind of very twisted, like how a person would fall in love with a beast only by knowing he was good at heart. But for me, it sounds a lot like manipulation.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's very unhealthy. Don't do that. Don't fall in love or doing this to you. Yeah. And just with the hopes of transforming him. So like this very sacrificial role of women is in the story as well. Like how women have to believe in love and how they have to believe in the transformational power of love, but in a very problematic way. Because of course love is beautiful and it is transformational, but not like this. And yeah, unlike other fairy tales, I mean, Little Mermaid, she sells her voice. What? You don't sell your voice, girl. Never.
She sells her voice and she gives up on her own true nature.
Yeah.
As a mermaid, to be voiceless, speechless, like not being able to speak for herself in a human body just because she wanted to be with the prince. No.
And then, yeah, and there's many others like the Sleeping Beauty. I mean, she was sleeping, don't kiss her, please. Very basic stuff. But at least we have a few new stories that are pretty good, in my opinion. Like Mulan. I still love Mulan. And
Moana.
Moana. I love Moana. I love her grandma. You're so magical and beautiful. And I want to watch Raya now. She's also the dragon and she's saving things. And yeah, I think it's more empowering to see women in those positions. Tiana is also really nice.
I didn't watch.
The Princess and the Frog. She has her own business and she's like a go-getter. And yes, I think it's good that the stories around women are also changing. Because, like we said in a few episodes, I think it is so important to see representations of who we are on screen and know that our stories are also like allowed to exist and that you can have a different story than, the one you're living that might be of oppression or suppression or silencing.
This also shows that women can have powerful roles. They can be their own saviors, They don't need someone else to come and take care of everything for them. So it's really beautiful to see this empowerment. And I think we can move on to the next thing. I think you already mentioned a little bit about that. But, the role of women in the care of people. They're caregivers, usually. Women are portrayed as caregivers, right?
Yeah.
So the institutionalization of medicine has really taken off the power from women, that they had the main responsibility of taking care of the health of the community that they lived in. And they took off this power from them and gave the power to the hands of male doctors and physicians. And I think it's really interesting. I read an article on ecofeminism that is really portrayed their point of view on that situation. And they were saying that lay women, they were usually very knowledgeable on natural treatments such as using herbs and, assisting birth and settling bones and doing bath with some kind of natural elements there that could help you heal faster. They were all very natural and also not a lot of intervention. They were not invasive, yeah. And they were able to take care of their community. It was not like a high level technological treatment, but they had the power to take care of their families. And then, because of institutionalization, only men were allowed to go to universities. Mainly men could go to universities. And then those women, they were not allowed to work in healthcare anymore.
Yes.
And so during that time, the Catholic Church was also very associated with this institutionalization because they had a lot of power. And it's pretty crazy how even the education at the time, medicine was not teaching all what we know as medicine nowadays. They were teaching things such as astronomy and religion and all those things that we don't really associate with medicine nowadays. And they were saying,
because like traditionally the first universities that appeared, they were very interdisciplinary, as we would call. So like the mandatory things they had to learn was like astronomy, philosophy, Latin, and religion, plus whatever they wanted to do, like medicine.
So yeah, I believe women at that time, they had more knowledge about healthcare, indeed, than those men who went to universities, but they were not allowed to practice. And then those men, they had to have the supervision or allowance of a priest in order to practice their work, which was very, very invasive. And most of the times they would not really heal the person. I think it was causing more harm than healing, to be honest, with all the bleeding and all that,
Yeah.
And then later on, there was this witch trial thing, and then the Catholic Church once again was disempowering women and saying that those who could heal using herbs, especially, they were doing something that was related to the devil, and that, their own healing abilities were accused as something bad. And then they were accused of witchcraft. And we know all the history, how bad it was, the witch trials. So it's a long history of disempowerment of women in terms of taking care of their communities, taking care of their selves, and the way that they feel disconnected with their own bodies because everything has been institutionalized and we don't feel connected. We cannot listen to our bodies anymore. Everything has been very compartmentalized and seen in a very, very masculine way.
That's right. And I think this kind of excluding women from the system, from biomedical system and all those things, is also related to like putting women to work only in the household, because in the past they used to share labor in the community, like gathering fruits and gathering food and all those things while men went hunting. And it was more balanced, I would say, the division of labor by gender, because it was necessary for everyone's survival. But because of the development of capitalist system, women stayed at home because they needed to take care of this family unit that would produce more workers. And her labor was not monetized. So she didn't receive for this role of taking care, for cleaning, for washing, for, doing things that we take for granted until nowadays in our society. So like the second wave of feminism talked a lot about this. What about these women that are doing all this hard work and don't receive anything? So they don't have financial independence. They cannot, even if their husbands are not treating them right, they cannot move away from them because they don't have a way to sustain their own lives. And this goes back to the whole process of institutionalization that you were talking about. Like universities, they excluded women from that and ignored all the knowledge they had or appropriated part of the knowledge for men only. And because women couldn't acquire this certification that said they had a certain knowledge, they couldn't go to the workforce. So they couldn't find jobs in society. And it's just a very harmful cycle that perpetuates itself. And it's crazy how only like the 20th century, by the end of the 20th century, women started going to universities and actually taking place in the job market. But until nowadays, we still deal with a lot of wage gaps, like between gender and so many other things. And even like you were talking about the biomedical system, the male body only is taken as the example for medicine. And it's taken as this human body, but it's not a human body, it's a male body. And females have different hormones. We work differently. Our anatomy is a bit different as well. And if you don't take that into consideration, how are you producing all these drugs, all the pharmaceuticals, and even like security systems and everything that is focused on the male population, excluding us over and over and over and over and over again throughout history? So that's why I think Women's History Month is important to remind us of what is history and what is the system that we are creating consciously, honestly. It's a power dynamic. Yeah. I digress.
No. Like, male bodies are the standard. Women bodies are the alternative. And that's really what we see in healthcare. Biomedicine is the standard. Holistic healing, what we've been studying that is really related to the feminine, is the alternative.
Yeah. I wonder why.
And like, even when you were talking about testing drugs and all that on men because they don't have all the cycles and all that. One thing that is pretty important, it's about pills and contraceptives. They could do that with men, but they thought the side effects were too bad for men to endure. But of course, they're not too bad for women to endure, right? Yeah. And the history of creating contraceptives is horrible.
It is.
Populations that those medicines were tested. I mean, it was like people from developing countries that didn't know what they were doing. Some of them were studying medicine, and they said, if you don't take this drug, you cannot continue to study medicine in this university. It was really coercive. It was really, really a violence, I would say. Mm-hmm. And even nowadays, not giving proper attention and focus to health issues that only women have, it's really perpetuating this mindset that women are not so important as men. Like PCOS, endometriosis, all those health issues that women have, they still don't have a cure, right? I mean, many things still don't have a cure and not even proper treatment.
Yeah, and the thing is, those diseases or those conditions that only women have, they weren't important for men to deal with because it's not affecting a male body. And even like understanding hormonal cycles of women and seeing what works for them is so important because we have very different ways of functioning because we have different bodies, men and women. But we've been treated as only as the male. And I was talking to my sister even like about endometriosis. I think it's weird how only recently people have been doing like more serious research about it because so many women suffered from this for so long. And yeah, and even like don't even talk about, for example, obstetric violence that happens to women all the time. and they don't even know it's type of violence when they go into birth and certain things happen to them. And yeah, it's horrible. And I think we need more care and less invasive procedures in our bodies in general.
Also, neglection of the emotional side is really important to mention. I think people have to be more open, especially in some countries, they are already very open-minded about it, but some others not so much about, taking care of them emotionally, our emotional side, and going to the psychologist or to, a therapist. I think it's really important because it really helps people to deal with very challenging situations in their lives, and people sometimes they have a hard time admitting that they need help and that they have this emotional struggle, especially men, I would say. They have a really hard time to accept that they need help, especially related to emotions.
Yeah. That's why this patriarchal system we live in is harmful for everyone. Everyone. You men that are listening to this, I know you're not many of you, but it's harmful for you too. I mean, men suffer from mental health issues very strongly as well, but they don't have a support system. They don't have anyone to go to because it's conditioned that it's vulnerable and is an emotional labor you're not able to do or any of those things. And if you check suicide rates, men in their 40s is like the highest one. And it's not a surprise actually, because those people have been taught that their emotions are not allowed. So how can you work through like this condition that you're going through, the sadness that you're going through, if you don't have means of expressing them or, healing them? So I think it's important. Holistic healing is very wonderful in this aspect because it's, even though a lot of women search for it, there's almost not a lot of men looking for holistic healing. I think it's a very beautiful approach to mind, body, and spirit that can help a lot of people. And it's not invasive.
And I think it's important to clarify what's holistic healing because many people don't know. Holistic healing, it's healing your entire self, mind, body, spirit. But I would also add, not only your physical self, like your individuality, but also the collective healing, also your community, also the environment. Everything around you impacts your health and your well-being. So I truly believe that if your neighbors are not doing right, if they're not healthy, you will not be able to be completely healthy. If the environment is not healthy, you're not going to be healthy as well. Everything is interconnected. And I think having this broader perspective on health and well-being, it's really important for us to move forward, from now on and be aware that we shouldn't care only about ourselves, but we should care about our communities, our environment, planet Earth, everything matters.
Yes. It's a choice, people. I think all of us can decide to be more aware of the things that are going on and decide to embrace this healing and embrace more this collective aspect that we need to help each other and remembering the role of women in all this, because from the beginning, I think we've been holding pieces together in communities, and this role of caring not only for an individual but caring for the collective, for the future generations, and for the people who are living already here is something we can learn from them in very deep levels, I would say.
Yes, I think it's really important you mentioning how this feminine energy is important for the collective, for everyone, because we've been living in a society that is very masculine. And we, as women or men, we have been emphasizing a lot our masculine side because we need to hustle and we need to conquer the world, but also we need to give more emphasis to our femininity or feminine energy, if you don't want to use femininity. This side that is caring and nurturing and accepting. And it allows things to happen more naturally and intuitively. And caring for everyone around you as well, not only as an individual, but as one in a group, one in a society, one in this whole world, right? So, yeah, I think we can use this month to really reflect on how can we bring more of this positive traits of the feminine energy into our lives, and how we can show to other people around us how they can also embrace this side, because everyone have a feminine energy and a masculine one as well, men or women, and showing them a way that they could be more receptive and they could be more caring towards themselves, more accepting towards their own being, but also towards others, and having more compassion and more kindness. This would allow a lot of change. If you're not restricting yourself to believe in one single thing, you can be flexible to hear, as we said in the beginning, the narratives and stories of many people around you. Do not close your eyes for the possibilities that are not obvious in front of you, but be open to listen to all the other possibilities.
Yeah. Even though change and the unknown is scary for a lot of people, I think all of us need to embrace both sides of us, the feminine and the masculine, especially the feminine nowadays, because we do need more healing in this world for ourselves and our communities. And I also wanted to mention that because it's Women's History Month, let's start making history, people. And let's start remembering what are the histories, like the stories, histories, and tales that we're telling for ourselves. What are the narratives that we keep about women? What are the narratives about the feminine? What are the narratives we're passing forward to the kids? And let's make this month something that we can reflect upon on an energetic level, like my sister was saying, but also on a political level, because it should be inclusive. And like we're saying, this women that we talk about, Women's History Month, is not only for cisgender women, but also everyone that identifies as women, especially those who are in more vulnerable conditions. We embrace everyone, and we wish everyone to think about it and dedicate your time to just harness this beautiful female energy that all of us have and move forward for more gender equality. We do need it. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Stay tuned for the next ones. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to give us a like, share, comment down below what you thought about it. If you're listening to us on podcast, you can always leave us a review. And thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.